everyone. So today I'll be presenting to you how Achebe presents colonization in his story Dead Man's Path. So Chinua Achebe is a Nigerian author whose work mostly focused on the critics on colonization of Africa. So as a context, Nigeria was colonized by the British Empire. Yeah. So in his story Dead Man's Path, he frames colonization as the most extreme form of totalitarianism because it disrupts natives' habits and traditions and takes away the governance of their own state. He also argues that colonization would always fail because society's culture and traditions are too well established. But he also argues that natives and colonists could rise to success if they treated each other as equals. So here's a brief resume of Dead Man's Path. So there is a new headmaster who is determined to eradicate traditional beliefs and spread Western cultures. And villagers have a traditional path that the school decides to block. So an old priest comes to discuss the reopening of the path with the headmaster, but the headmaster says no. And this leads to the villager and the school suffering from negative consequences. So his first argument is that in Dead Man's Path, colonization is portrayed as an extreme form of totalitarianism because the government exercises a high degree of control over individuals' public and private lives. So this means that the disruption of habits and traditions of natives is created in order to destroy existing forms of rules. So in other words, natives are not allowed to rule themselves anymore because somebody else does that for them. So the context for the next quote is that the footpath is very important to the functioning of the community, and it is what kind of leads them and their actions. So when the school decides to block the path because it kind of threatens their authority, the villagers object, but so the headmaster uses force. Heavy stakes were planted closely across the path at the two places where it entered and left the school premises. These were further strengthened with barbed wire. This quote is an example of factors of the government controlling a public aspect of life in order to disrupt the villagers' traditions. Entered and left is like a reminder that the blockage is not there to control where they are allowed or not allowed to go, but it is there to control the villagers' movements. Also, the violent imagery of sticks and barbed wire really emphasizes how forceful this application of authority is, and also those words symbolize tools that are used to hurt, oppress, and restrain others. This forceful application is highlighted by words that represent strength, such as heavy and strengthened, which really emphasizes the commanding and invasive nature of the blockage. Achebe also portrays the government's attempts to remove traditional beliefs and makes it the norm for future generations to be ruled by someone else. According to Achebe, colonists want natives to live long enough under another's rule and in order to become used to the new imposed reality. So the context for the next quote is that the headmaster says that his duty is to eradicate traditional beliefs in order to stop existing forms of rulings. The whole purpose of our school, he says finally, is to eradicate just such beliefs as that. Dead men do not require footpaths. The whole idea is just fantastic. Our duty is to teach your children to laugh at such ideas. This quote really highlights that the school's goal is not to make a better world necessarily out of the villagers, but to really completely eliminate traditional beliefs out of moral and legal obligations. The word duty really emphasizes the militaristic nature of the school and how it's kind of a war between the natives and the colonists. Also, this quote really puts an emphasis on the distinction between the school and the villagers by saying our school and your children, which just shows that they do not see each other as part of the same group, but as different groups. This distinction is further further emphasized on by the repetition of the whole, to signify that they both have different goals and different ideas of how to reach those goals, which really strengthen this idea that they're not the same and they don't perceive each other as the same. Achebe also highlights in this dialogue that totalitarian idea that the government is distinct from the population it controls and that they are entitled to be their superior. And in this story, this entitlement is justified as a duty to educate the villagers and make them forget that the school considers to be mystical and senseless ideas based on fate. So basically it means that the headmaster perceives himself as superior to villagers because he thinks that he's more intelligent than them and really doesn't try to understand why the path is important to them. Another argument is that Achebe argues that no matter how much colonists try to take away natives' existing forms of rules, they cannot succeed because traditions and systems are already well established. He also argues that if they treated each other as equals, they could thrive. What this means is that Achebe really believes that colonization would never truly work because traditions are too well established. People identify themselves with them and don't identify themselves with the new traditions that colonists try to impose. But if they started working together and seeing each other as part of the same identity, colonists and villagers could both share power and be more successful. So the context of the next quote is that an old priest comes to discuss the blockage of the path with the headmaster, and the headmaster says that his duty is to teach children not to follow and believe traditions. The priest responds that it would not work because people follow those they identify with. Our duty is to teach your children to laugh at such ideas. What you say may be true, replied the priest, but we follow the practice of our fathers. This passage states that no amount of colonization will erase long-established traditions and ruling system because individuals only follow those they identify with. So the word practice really demonstrates that even when the school exists and tries its best to stop those practices, villagers still engage in those well-established systems. And the distinction of the group is once again reminded by the we and you. But what's ironic in this quote is that compared to the previous quote where the headmaster was saying that I am part of a group and you are the other, now it's the priest saying that he is part of a group and the headmaster is the other. So ironically, this makes them equal in a way because they are both the other to the other. The old priest is also a representation of elders. Achebe really perceive elders as an old model of authority that moderates destabilizing elements, like in this story would be the blockage. And the old priest comes and says that which suggests that he could make compromises with the headmaster. So in this way, this quote really represents that natives could see the possibility of working with colonists, but sadly colonists do not want to. Achebe really believes in harmony and diversity. So he really explores this idea in his works, and the possibility that negotiation and accommodations could solve conflicts. In this story, their conflict could be resolved with the headmaster and the villagers treating each other as equals and respecting the other's beliefs. So the context for the next quote is that the old priest explains to the headmaster that if they live side by side, they could both be happier. If you reopen the path, we shall have nothing to quarrel about. What I always say is, let the auk perch and let the eagle perch. The word we, compared to other previous quotes, implies that they are part of the same group now, and that they are similar. This similarity is further emphasized on by the use of auk and eagle to represent the two groups. both birds are different, but they're still alike in the way that they are both predatory birds and they both have similar goals, but different ideas and ways to reach them. So this quote really emphasizes on the fact that they're different, but they have enough similarities to be identified as part of the same groups. Also, Achebe uses the word quarrel to define the argument in order to explain that they can be peace, but instead they decide to fight over trivial issues. So in this story, Achebe really explains that individuals will only follow those they identify with. And both colonists and natives would benefit from working together and sharing the same identity, because then they could both have control and they could both get what they want. So in conclusion, colonial rule is a totalitarian form of rule because as it is shown with the barricade and the school's purpose, agents of government are imposing control into villagers' private and public lives, and they are actively trying to remove beliefs and the practice of traditional ruling systems. The author also argues that colonization would never work because villagers do not identify with colonists. But because they're similar, if they decide to treat each other as equals and live side by side, both groups could share power and be better off.